So today, I hope you get to know yourself a little bit better based on what we're doing here. So let me introduce, without further ado, our speaker, Aaron Asay. Today, we're going to hear from Aaron. He started in ministry at Kearney Evangelical Free Church as the Director of Communications and Technology. He's also worked for Church Solutions Group, a company that was devoted to helping churches grow and become more effective. He now works as the Director of Ministries at Calvary Christian Church in Bellevue. He's recently become a friend of mine and is a great friend of Nebraska Christian College. Please give an institute welcome to Aaron Asay.
All right, that's enough. Wow, that was impressive. That was impressive. Look at that. You would think that I actually paid those guys to do that, because I actually do. How are you guys today? It's good. 1 week of school down. This is cool. This is very cool. I was here about 2 weeks ago. I spoke to the first-year students. We talked about church communications in the dungeon, otherwise known as the lecture hall, and it was really cool. And I'm glad to hear that the biggest challenge and obstacle that they were facing that day has been overcome. They all received their passwords to Logos. And so they know how to now study the Bible. Believe it or not, it was like a big deal. Somebody said to Christy, they said, like, when do we get our Logos passwords? And it's like, they've been in school for 24 hours. This is the biggest thing they want to do. They don't want to know where Old Chicago is. They don't want to know like when the next baseball game is. They want to get into Logos. So good for you guys. Man, it's an honor to be here with you guys. This is really fun. This microphone is driving me crazy. This is like the church support guy in me. This is like my worst nightmare, right? Because for 10 years, I've given these microphones to pastors and speakers going on the stage, and they all say, well, these things don't fit. And I have no idea how to use this. And I said, that's cool. Let's grow up and get over it. And now Jesse says, so do you need tape for your microphone? I'm like, I have no idea. I've never worn one of these microphones before. So I'm waiting for it to fall off my ear or cut out. Most assuredly that will happen. But let me tell you a little bit about myself, my history. Thank you, Andy, for that introduction. You've obviously got a LinkedIn account. And if you want to know more about me, you can go to LinkedIn. But there's some things that I realized over the last couple of years about myself through this Thinking Wavelengths activity that we're going to talk about today. And it's been really cool. I went to college straight out of high school. My dream was to be in the Cornhusker Marching Band. And so there was no consideration of this great college. I said, I'm going to UNL. I'm going to be on the marching band. I spent all summer with this little pad thing in my basement trying to figure out how to do it. I got to camp 3 weeks before school started. I went through the whole training process. I went through the audition process, and the very first thing that happened was that I got cut. I was the last one cut. And they said to me, hey, that's cool. You can actually come back and audition to be in the pit. And that's anybody that play in the pit. Okay, so I'm not going to offend anybody. That's where they play the bells. And drummers do not play bells. So I said, no, not going to happen. Went back to my dorm room. Already had said the tearful goodbye to my mom, and she's back in Kearney, and I'm in eastern Nebraska now, so I'm not going back home. So I said, what am I going to do? And I was a broadcasting student at that point. So I went to the TV station. It was called 1011. It's still on the air today, I believe. And they said, hey, we are hiring. Why don't you apply for a job? So I did. And lo and behold, to me, this 17-year-old kid got a job at a TV station working the cameras in the studio, my very first year before I'd even started broadcasting school. And I never made it to one broadcasting class in Lincoln because I loved that job so very much that I poured myself into it and not into school. At the end of that school year, I got a letter from the University of Nebraska kindly asking me to not come back the next semester. And so I lived in a trailer, seriously, and went home and started working for another TV station. And if you were to look at my resume, it just goes on and on. And for years, I felt so terribly bad about this. I eventually went back and got my degree at UNK. I have a general studies degree, which is awesome because it's more work than like a regular degree. It's 3 minors. and minors are not easy to get. So I got my degree. I kept doing these jobs. At some point, I landed at this place called the IT Help Desk. And I was 20 years old, and I got a job because they said, you can get Windows XP for free. And I said, this is awesome. I want this. And so I got this job. I started fixing students' computers. We removed viruses like crazy, and I got all the free software that I could get my hands on for my one computer. And it wasn't 6 months that I was in that job, and they asked me to apply for a full-time job at UNK. I mean, this is the University of Nebraska at Kearney. They said, we have a full-time job. We think you should apply for it, and you're 20. And so I did. And 2 weeks later, I was the manager of the help desk. I managed all the student workers and all the computers that came through that help desk. And then a year later, I got married, had a year left in school, spent some time in the help desk, poured myself into that, and they said, we've got a promotion for you. Literally, I came home from my honeymoon. They said, we want to promote you. You are now the technology consultant for the University of Nebraska at Kearney. I said, that's cool. What do I do? And I said, well, you're going to sit in this room full of all this stuff called inventory, and you're going to sell stuff to students who want computers and software and other stuff. And also, by the way, any other technology purchase that comes through the university is going to come across your desk. And I was 21. I said, okay, sounds great. I had a great desk, big desk. So here I am. I'm the technology buyer for the University of Nebraska at Kearney. I sold $3 million worth of technology that year. That was pretty cool until I graduated from college and I got this itch and said, oh, been at this job long enough. I think I need to go get another one. So I started looking. I looked for everything. I thought maybe I'll go work and sell computers for Apple. I thought maybe I would go do something else. And it was about that time my church called me up and said, hey, Aaron, we want to do a capital campaign video. We think you know how to make videos because you used to work for the news, and we think you could do it. I said, great, let's do it. And 6 months later, they said, well, we want you to be our first full-time technology person. So I left my job there, and I went here. If you're following along, this is like 18 jobs in like 3 years, it felt like. And I had this really long resume. And eventually I spent 5 years at that church. That's where I cut my teeth in ministry. It was fantastic. And then I left that church to go continue my ministry at a kind of a parachurch organization in Chicago. And it was there where I learned about this construct called thinking wavelengths. And so I want to introduce this to you guys. Thinking wavelengths, I simplify it by saying I think it's your wiring understood. So here's one thing. Everybody starts off with something tweetable, so here's your tweetable thing. Your wiring directly affects how you are prone to act. Not how you will act or how you should act, how you're prone to act. The way you're naturally thinking, the way you naturally think and respond affects directly how you're prone to act, okay? So to tell you a little bit more about this and give you some examples, I want you to meet my 5 friends. They're not actually my friends, but I made them up. Okay, number 1, Marty. Marty's 48 years old. He's been at the same job since he graduated from college. That's 25 years. How many are under the age of 25? Okay, how many's parents had a job for 25 years or more, the same job? Okay, how many think you're going to keep the same job for 25 years? 1. Okay, Marty's coworkers recognize him as the best in his field, and he is known for his consistent work product. Marty loves his job. Okay, let's meet my next friend, Kelly. Kelly's 27. She's been a 5th grade teacher for nearly 3 years. In her first 2 years of teaching, she loved the creative challenge of teaching the students in a way that they would understand. Her success has quickly landed her a role of assistant principal, a role that she fears. Okay? Now Bob. Bob is 57, has recently become the divisional manager for his company. These days he finds himself in meetings with the company leadership and those he used to work with on the assembly line. He loves this role much more than the 9-to-5 grind he endured for so many years. Okay, Frank. Frank is 37. He just sold his tech startup for a fortune to Google. That's my dream. He's got no time to spend on his earnings, though, because he's on to his next venture. He's about ready to go public. Some may think he's lucky for leaving his role as a banker and hitting the jackpot, but he feels unstoppable and competent. And finally, Connie. Connie is 45, and for the past 10 years, she has worked as a telemarketer for a research agency. Every day, she writes a long list of ideas as she talks to people on the phone. And every day, she finds time to share those with her boss. He thanks her, but he never acts on the ideas. Because of this, Connie has come to hate her job. Okay? How many of you people feel like one of my friends? Anybody feel a little bit confused? Some? Okay, good. That's good. These are normal, everyday people. They may not be in the same pattern of life as you are or have the same work. I know that you guys are about ready to start work in some years, but this is going to be you. You're going to be like them. So let's learn about yourself, okay? Thinking wavelengths is one of many constructs that we use in this strategic planning process. I and a bunch of other executive pastors travel the country, and we get the privilege of about 2 to 3 times a year spending about 2 to 3 days up to a full year of visiting with these churches, helping them make strategic operational plans and helping them move the needle in their communities. And these things have helped churches in Omaha, these things have helped churches in Nebraska, they've helped churches all over the world. Thinking wavelengths is the very first exercise we do, because what happens is we get the whole church staff and some of the elders in a room. And when we do that, it's often that we start to learn about each other. I'm going to use my staff as an example. A couple months ago in March, we all sat in one room, all 12 of us. It was 10 staff and 2 elders. And although we have staff meetings every week, and we have all staff meetings once a month, and we see each other, and we like to high five, and we have great camaraderie, it doesn't always mean that we know everything about the way that we think and act. As a matter of fact, no matter what size of an organization you're in, there's always a tendency to be a little bit siloed. And so we always use this as a way to break down the walls in a big group. But what it's really good for is helping you understand a little bit more how you think. Now, I want to be really clear right now. This is not DISC. This is not StrengthsFinders. This is not Standout. It's not any other kind of personality assessment. The things that you'll learn about today will change. The way that you think can change depending on your circumstances. But it helps you understand where your role is in your organization, but also where you fit and the why you think. Because remember, your natural wiring directly affects the way you are prone to act. And that's what we want to try and discover. So I want to take you guys through this. On your tables, there's a handout. Looks like this. And we have 6 guiding questions. And I want you guys to actually answer these right now. So hopefully you have a pen or a pencil or something like that. I'm going to ask the question. All the questions are on a scale of 1 to 10. So I want you to rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. We ready? Question number 1. I'll repeat these twice, so if you forget one or miss one, I'll repeat them again. Question number 1. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you do with risk? A 1 does not like risk. A 10 thrives on risk. Rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, number 2. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you do with change? Change in your life. Remember, this is you personally. This is not you in your job or your role or your volunteerism. This is you personally, your natural wiring. How do you do with change? A 1 obviously does not like change. A 10 thrives on change. Okay, question number 3. How are you with multitasking? A 1 has to have things, one thing at a time. No multitasking for me. A 10 has multiple balls in the air all the time. Just juggling, juggling, juggling. Many tasks, many things, many routes, many people. Okay? On 1 to 10. Number 4, what is your pattern of logic? In other words, do you need to have things one thing at a time? Step 1, step 2, step 3. That's a 1. A 10 would thrive on no logic at all. step 10, step 13, step 54. I call this the IKEA question. Like when I open a box of IKEA furniture, I just dive in because I think I'm smarter than you are, and I guarantee you I am. 'Cause I've installed more IKEA stuff than all of you combined, I'm positive. Pattern of logic. Okay, number 5. How do you handle ambiguity? Everybody know what ambiguity is? Okay. A 1 thrives on no clarity at all. Or, excuse me, a 1 thrives on clarity. I had that backwards. A 1 thrives on clarity. I must understand everything that I need to understand about what you're asking me to do before I start. A 10 thrives on no clarity at all. Just tell me what you want to do, I'll figure it out. Okay? Finally, number 6. How do you respond when you hear about opportunity? Okay? Someone has an opportunity for you. A 1 must know all the details before I begin. I must understand what the opportunity is. I've got to assess the risk. I've got to feel really good about it. A 10 is on the opposite of that. I don't need any clarification. There's an opportunity. I'm going to go for it. I don't need to think about the risk, my family, my friends. I'm just going to go. Okay? You guys need me to repeat those? No? Hearing an overwhelming no. Okay, here's what I want you to do. You guys rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Now we're going to practice our math. So I want you guys to add up all 6, and I want you to divide by 6. This is called the average. Okay, so take a little bit of time, get your iPhone out. I think Androids can do this math as well. But if anybody has, I have 2 iDevices if you need to borrow one. This is by far the hardest thing you're going to do all day. Okay? Find the average of those things. And now I want you to write that average down and just hang on to it for a second, okay? I'm going to explain how we measure this. I'm going to explain what we do with this. I put these things on a spectrum. Okay? So if you look up at the screens, I have a line here, and I divided it up from 1 to 10. This is not a ranking spectrum. This is a spectrum in which you could look at yourself compared to other things. Well, these are called data points, right? And so your number is a data point on this spectrum. Make sense? Let me explain kind of how this spectrum works. This is called the opposite sides of the spectrum. Overlay this. People who are on this side of the spectrum are risk adverse. They resist change. They have few variables. They think one step at a time. They have a low ambiguity tolerance, and they are problem task oriented. If you were listening to the questions, I would say things like a 1 dislikes change. Well, that's reflected here. Okay? On the opposite side of the spectrum, a 10 or somebody closer to the 10, they embrace risk. They welcome change. They love many variables. They take quantum leaps instead of one step at a time. They have a high ambiguity tolerance, and they're very opportunity oriented. Okay? So what do we do with this spectrum? Well, we've broken this spectrum up into 5 different areas that you can assign yourself to. These are 5 key areas, and this is the first time we see this terminology. We have people that are minders, people that are keepers, people that are builders, people that are finders, and people that are conceivers. So let's learn about those guys, okay? Minders. Minders are people that get the work done. They mind the store. Tendencies of a minder. Minders like to document things. They take things one step at a time. They understand the task before they start, and they handle administrative details well. Those are what minders are. Keepers. Keepers can manage a unit or a team having both people skills and the organizational abilities to do so. Okay? These are the tendencies of a keeper. Keepers can run a department. They have diagnostic tendencies, so when they find a problem, they want to figure out why there was a problem so they can avoid it next time. They're not usually innovative, although that's not a bad thing. Not everybody can be innovative, right? And they manage people in their area of expertise. Builders. Builders are capable of managing the whole store. They possess an appreciation for the strategic and administrative things. Here's the tendencies of a builder. They handle details and see the broader vision. They handle variables well. They're organized, and they're operationally biased. Plus, they're strategic by nature. The builders, right in the middle of the spectrum. 2 more to go. Finders. Finders open up new territory. Although follow through is not their strength. Anybody know somebody who has like a lot of ability to make a decision, but once the decision is made, it kind of falls off their plate? This is a finder. Finders' tendencies: sense and seize opportunities, spot voids and fill them. They're bored by a steady state. They love a new challenge. You guys know this guy, Scott Beckenauer? I'm not going to tell you which one he is. Conceivers. Conceivers are bright. They articulate and persuasive, but working with them, they don't actually expect things to come to closure. So what does that mean? That means they have tons and tons and tons of ideas, and they share them with you freely, but they don't actually expect you to choose every single one of them. Okay? Tendencies of a conceiver: obviously they embrace risk, they welcome change, they love that 40,000-foot view. Don't put me on the ground. And they talk about the new, but they don't actually execute. So let's take your number and chart yourself. This is what mine looks like. I am a 5.2. So I'm a builder. Now let me tell you about this. Remember when I told you about my past? I said I felt worthless. I felt so bad because I had had so many jobs over so many years, and I thought, this can't be normal. You know, there weren't studies about Generation X or Generation Y or millennials, and nobody really understood that people weren't going to stay at jobs for 25 years. And I had, guys like my grandpa who just could not understand why every time I came to see him, I was telling him about this new job that I had taken. And it's a real thing. I mean, eventually you start to feel like, I'm tired of this job, I got to get out of it. And I honestly I felt worthless. I thought, man, I remember saying to my mom one time, I said, who in their right mind is going to want me? And of course my mom said, well, everybody's going to want you. My wife said the same thing, so that I got a good one. What I realized last year, or about a year and a half ago, was I wasn't leaving those jobs because I was disgruntled or disappointed. I was leaving them because they didn't really feel right to me. They didn't fit my needs. I looked at this job that I had at the church. I thought, man, God called me into ministry. How in the world could, after 5 years, He plant the seed in my mind that says, Aaron, I think this is not the right place for you anymore. I think you need to move on. Like I wasn't really feeling called to another ministry. And at that point, there weren't other ministries that were like knocking on my door saying, Aaron, you've got to come lead our church. I was a tech director. Matter of fact, my first year I was called the firefighter. That's what it said on the top of my job description. Never let the elders alone make your title. I was the firefighter. So I did that for 1 year. It was fantastic. I just ran like crazy. I wanted everybody to love me. I wanted to do a great job. After year 1, I realized my job is technology. So I spent year 2 building this technology thing. Honestly, some of the things that they said to me when they hired me were, if you could just make sure the pastor's microphone was on when he gets on the stage, that would be a huge win for us. This is a church of 1,000, and this was some of their greatest concerns. So I'm like, that's an easy one. Let's just make sure the mic works. And so what I started doing was creating ways and systems, and I started creating people, and I started developing volunteers so that they could do this work. And after year 2, we had a key staff leader leave, and communications was up for grabs. And one of the elders came to me and said, Aaron, we want you to oversee our communications. We feel like that'd be a good fit for you. It'd be a good challenge. You're really good at this. You come and do this. And so I took that, and I said, that's great. Let's figure it out. And so I read, and I looked, and I researched, and I used my intuition, and I built this system for communications. And then year 4 came around, I did it again. Year 5 came around, I started feeling like I've got to figure something else out. Matter of fact, I did my annual performance review at the end of year 4, and it said, Aaron, what are your goals? And I said, wow, this is a tough one. So I wrote them down, walked into my supervisor's office. We start reading through them, and he says, Aaron, your goals for 2010 are to reinvent your job or to get a new one. He said, I'm guessing you have other offers on the table. I said, well, I'm not really sure. And that landed me in the office with the executive pastor and the senior pastor and the worship pastor and the college pastor. And they weren't mad at me. They wanted to take care of me. They wanted to help me figure out what I needed. And I said, here's what I think I need. I think I need to lead the college ministry here. And they said, that sounds awesome. We would love that. But we actually just need you to be our tech director. And I said, you know, I respect that. You need a tech director. You need a solid guy in this position. But I don't think it's going to be me. And so I left. And for a year, I wrestled with that. I thought, why did I do that? I was in a great position and a great job by then. I loved it. It was fantastic. But it wasn't until then that I actually realized my strength is a builder. And what they needed me to be was a keeper. They needed me to do the same thing. They needed me to do great work. They needed me to lead teams and do things. And I said, I don't want to just do that. I want to build things. I want to make things. I want to make things that are new. And until I realized that was my natural wiring, I didn't really get it. And it was like this huge freeing moment to me. I thought, oh my gosh, like, God put me there, and for 2 years, he let me build technology until I could hand it off to the volunteers. And then I hardly ever talked about technology. And then he said, communications is your thing. So I built communications, and I handed it off to the office staff, and they were doing it all. And that's what I do today. That's what I do every single day. I build things, and I hand them off. I build things, and I hand them off. That's my strength. So let's look at yours. You charted yourself here. I want to tell you one thing about this chart, lest you become confused. This is not a popularity contest. Just because you're a 1 doesn't make you less valuable than a 10 or vice versa, okay? I want to show you guys something. The first year students saw this. I love this thing. It's called The Diffusion of Innovation. Who read this book when it came out? It came out in like 1962. Nobody? There's always one. So the diffusion of innovation is really fantastic. It was some great research done. I believe it still proves to be valuable today. If you look at it, it says this: 2.5% of the population are innovators. 13.5% are called early adopters. These people I classify as basically cutting edge. Then you've got this whopping 68% called the majority. They're called the majority because there's 68%, okay? Early majority, late majority. Then you've got this final 16%, we call them laggards. This is an indicator that this was a book written in the 60s, because only I speak in this terminology now. Laggards. So you look at this and you say, well, when I look at the chart, those people closer to 10 were the innovators, right? Those are the people that make the ideas. And you look at it and you say, well, people that are kind of the 7s, they're the ones that kind of pick great ideas. They're not the ones that make the ideas. Those are the 10s. People that are 7s kind of pick the great idea and say, this is the one we're going to do. We're going to run with it. People that are a 5, they kind of get handed the idea and say, okay, build this. And then the 5 builds the idea and hands it to the 3 and says, okay, run this. And if you see anything wrong with it, let me know and we'll make it better. And then finally the 3 hands it to the 1 and says, this is what we do. And the 1 gets it done. Isn't that awesome? So here's what this means. And this is not scientific, but it means that if you look at one side, we have 16% of the world's population basically on that side of the chart. And the other 84% of us are on this side. Is that crazy? That means we need way more people to just do work than we need to actually figure out what we're going to do. They used to call this too many cooks in the kitchen. Right? This proves true today. So let's talk about this a little bit. I want you guys to take 1 minute. I want you to go around your table, and I want you to like pontificate or anything like that, like you knew what that word means, but I want you to figure out, I want you to go around the table and I want you to say, my name is, and I'm a, whatever your number is, and I want you to say whether or not you think you agree with that number. It says I'm a 5.5, so I'm a builder. but I actually think I think I'm a builder, okay? 1 minute. All right, you should be about halfway done. All right, 15 seconds. All right, let's wrap up. Okay. Now remember I told you about my friends with the weird names like Marty and Connie and those guys? I was smart, and I said, let's chart them. So let's look at where Marty belongs. Marty, 48, remember, age has nothing to do with it, by the way. Marty's 48, been at the same job since he graduated college. That's our first indication. Maybe Marty's more on this side than we thought. That's 25 years. His coworkers recognize him as the best in his field, and he's known for his consistent work product, and he loves his job. Now, if Marty had said to me, I hate my job, this would be my indication that he's probably in that minders category, but he probably might want to be a keeper or a builder. I'm not sure. But Marty's in his sweet spot. Marty loves what he does. He's very consistent. He does it every day, and he gets work done. He has for 25 years. Marty is a minder. Marty the minder. Is that awesome? Look at how that worked out. Kelly. Kelly is a keeper. Not in that way. Come on. Kelly the keeper. Just wait. Wait till we get to Bob. Yes. Kelly's a keeper. Let me explain what this means. Kelly's a keeper. Remember, she's been teaching for a couple years. She loves teaching students. And remember what I said? She's enjoyed the challenge of helping them learn differently. I know that you guys may never be a teacher, but teachers thrive on helping the students learn. It's not like they get to the end of the year and they say, well, you didn't learn the way I taught you, so let's repeat second grade. They want you to learn. They want you to be awesome. And so she loves that challenge, which means that she's doing the same thing over and over again. Teaching doesn't change. The information doesn't change. Nobody's going to change the way the Constitution was written. That's set in stone. It's done. So she does the same thing, but she loves the challenge of reinventing the way that she does it. Does that make sense? Now here's the deal. You see this arrow pointing towards the right? That's a left for left hand. Pointing towards the right. Kelly is being pulled to be a finder because she's now taking on this role in her organization of vice principal. This is an organizational role that requires her to make decisions, do things differently, and lead teams and staff. Now, she may end up loving this later on in life, but she's really enjoyed the work she's been doing as a keeper. But she's being pulled to be a finder. Make sense? And now the infamous Bob. Bob the builder. Congratulations, the college just paid $10,000 for copyright infringements. Sorry about that. So Bob is a builder. Remember? Bob is now the divisional manager of his company. He loves it. He used to be on the assembly line, so probably he used to be further this way, or his line would have been drawn this way. But he loves what he does now because he gets to not only interface with the people he used to work with, but he also interfaces with his bosses. And together, he feels like he's that missing link. People that are builders get this unique view of being able to say, I can interface with people on the left, and I can interface with people on the right. They think both operationally and strategically, okay? So Bob loves what he does. So here's what I said. Probably that little tiny dot in the keepers is where Bob used to be. And now he's in his sweet spot as a builder as a 5, okay? Frank the Finder. I know you were hoping I would say Frank the Tank. Frank the Finder. Remember Frank? Frank was 37. He just sold his tech startup for a fortune to Google, but he's got no time to think about it because he's already starting the next thing. Frank probably has somebody in his life that has tons and tons and tons of ideas. Chances are probably pretty good that Frank doesn't actually come up with these ideas for companies, but somebody does, and Frank's just savvy enough to pull it off. So Frank's an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are finders. Senior pastors are finders too. Why are senior pastors finders? Anybody? Yeah. That's exactly right. The vision is derived of things that we must do. Like, we have to accomplish the vision, and so we've got to figure out what we're going to do as a church to accomplish that vision. They get to cast the vision. I don't get to cast the vision in my church. Blake and Kyle don't get to cast the vision at the church. Scott casts the vision at our church. But Scott has to decide which things are most important, so he can say, Aaron, here's the things, I want you to build these. And I do. That's my job. So Frank is a finder. But remember, Frank used to be a banker. Bankers have to be super consistent. People want their money counted the same way every time they take it into the bank, believe it or not. So Frank used to function as a minder, and remember what I said? He loves his new role, not because he's rich and free-spirited, because he has tons of flexibility to pick the idea for himself and go make it happen. That's his sweet spot. So Frank used to be over there, and he's clear over here now. And finally, Connie. Connie the conceiver. Sounds really official. Connie is a telemarketer. What do telemarketers do? They make phone calls to random people all day, every day, and they have a script. I was a telemarketer for all of 23 minutes once when I lived in Lincoln. It was the worst telemarketer. I'm going to tell you the story. It's hilarious. It was the worst telemarketing job ever. I walked into the place. I said, I want to apply for a job. I need some cash. They said, great. We'd love to have you. Okay, that should have been my first indication. They said, when does training start? It starts right now. And so they said, and we do live training. We're selling newspaper subscriptions. Today you're going to be selling the Something in the South Journal. And I said, great. Is there like a computer that dials the phone and makes all the stuff? And they said, nope. Here's a page out of the phone book. Just call these people. I'm like, well, it's like 2001, but I'm pretty sure this is still illegal. So I tried it. It was fantastic. It was like, hey, my name is Aaron. I'm selling the newspaper. Click. Sweet. Hey, my name is Aaron. I'm selling this newspaper. Click. I mean, people were like, have you heard of the World Wide Web? I'm like, I didn't know it was available where you live. So they're a telemarketer. Her job is to do the same thing to the T. There is no flexibility. There is no deviating from the script. It is read the script, call the number I told you to. So Connie is functioning as a minder. But remember what I said? Every day she has a dozen or more ideas that she takes to her boss, and she probably just runs him ragged. She can't wait to get to the end of the day and say, look at all these ideas. Do you think we could implement them? I think we could sell more if we did this, or I think it would be more friendly if we did that, or I think it'd be better if we did this. And he just can't wait to get to the end of that conversation because he knows that that's not even remotely her place, and it's probably not his place either. Okay? So Connie is a 10 or a conceiver, but she is functioning as a 1 in her job. Let me tell you something about these lines. For Bob, he has a really short line. And for most of life, it's okay to not be in your exact sweet spot. But what you don't want is for your line to be crazy long. Connie is going to fastly hate her job. And if she doesn't, she's going to fear what would happen if she doesn't have a job and she's going to be forced to stay or something. But there is no way that Connie is going to love 25 years of every day making a list, going to tell somebody that you should do this, and then getting shut down and nothing ever implemented. There's no way. Vice versa, Frank, it happened. But as Frank stays a builder, but his job, like his sweet spot isn't a finder, he's going to run out of options as a banker. And he's going to get really tired really fast. And so if you look at this and you say someday, in my internship or my job or my volunteer position or in my organizational structure, if you look at yourself, and I know this, you don't have this job right now probably, but someday when you think about it, you're going to say, how long can I actually do that? Because you're going to look at a job description and you're going to say, Aaron's asking me to be a keeper. He's asking me to be a 3, but I'm a 7. I know it. I'm destined to be a senior pastor. How long can I be the small groups pastor before I can get my job as a senior pastor? Anybody ever ask that question? Because you will. If you're going to be a senior guy. It's like the thing right now. And it happens. Nobody graduates from here and goes to be a senior pastor. It probably won't happen. You will have to do something else along the way, or you'll have to do something too. Am I right? I mean, that's the best thing. You actually get to continue to cut your teeth in ministry. But what you're going to do is you're going to say, I'm a 7. I have to make the decisions on which is the best idea. I can't yield myself. And it's how you handle that decision that will come to either serve you or hurt you. So I would go back to my very smart thing that I said first. Your wiring directly affects how you are prone to act. It's your choice to act on it badly or greatly. It really is. As a church member of a staff, you could say, that's not my job, I don't want to do it that way, and you can just start counting the days until something happens with your job. Or you can say, I know I'm a 7, I'm going to do the very best I can, I'm going to stick it out, and someday I'm going to get to where I want to be. It's not a ladder climbing activity. It's just understanding your natural tendencies and getting it. It's a big deal. I mean, you guys are young, but I will tell you, there are lots of other areas in your life where you have to do this thing called compromise, especially once you get married. Because you're going to say, there is no way I'm doing the laundry. And she's going to say, me too. And then you're going to have a lot of dirty laundry until somebody finally gives in and does it. Okay? So remember this and think about it this year. This is my challenge to you guys. I know that the Institute is important, but this is a catalytic year for you guys, whether you're starting or ending. You have the choice to say, in every opportunity that you have, your internships, your first serve, your interactions with other churches, I know how I'm wired. I know what they're asking me to do. I can either try to do it my way or their way. And I would say, try it theirs. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Grab a seat. Let's talk for a few minutes because I'm guessing, not that we'll answer everyone's questions, but there's probably a few questions after you hear something like this. You start thinking about it, and how does that play out? And so I want to start where you ended, and that is like you're in a position and you're not sure if this is the right spot for you as far as, your thinking wavelengths at least. You're getting restless. You're not sure why. How do you go to your boss? And you gave your example, but how would you coach them to go to their boss to figure out whether they should quit or they should find a new position? I mean, how do you handle that situation? How would you go to your boss with this information?
Well, you've got to realize that if you have a boss, you're not the greatest thing. Your boss is the greatest thing. So you've got to first and foremost, you have to be super respectful, and that's just the key. If your line is long, if you are way out of your sweet spot or comfort zone, you're very much more prone to make rash decisions or to make demands. And it's not your place to make a demand. But what I would say is you've got to practice this, the great Maxwell principle of leading up. You've got to figure out what it means to actually make suggestions in a healthy and a helpful way. You've got to bring examples. You've got to try and help them understand that you're thinking out for their best interests. You've got to figure out how this will actually help them do things like make life easier for them or lighten their load. That's part of leading up. And I think if you can effectively lead up and not make it seem like you're wasting their time, they're going to be much more receptive to understanding how they can fit you into their organization. And that's actually really helpful for them. Like no boss wants to try and keep you if you don't want to be there. They want you to be at your full 120% capacity. They want you to be great because their success is derived from your success.
Yeah, good. Yeah, leading up, that's something we'll hopefully talk about some more. It can be a tricky thing, but that's a good place to start. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned that senior pastors fall into a certain category typically. Do you find other church positions typically fall into other categories? Is there kind of a general idea, this typically it goes like this, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's maybe not, it's not position based, but it's probably more responsibility based. It's the responsibility of the senior pastor to take all the ideas on the table, choose the ones we're going to do, and say this is what we're going to do. Likewise, like I said, as an executive pastor type, it's my job to take those ideas and actually get them built, because I'm the go-between between strategy and operation. And that's my role. And so your leadership of your church is probably more prone to think and act like a 5 or somewhere in that middle. And then this is the one that's always crazy. It blows people's minds, If you were to think about a staff position, let's take the worship guys, because I don't think they're here, so I can pick on mine. Like, let's take the worship guys. Like, where would you think the worship guys would be? You'd think they'd be like a straight up 10 or 11, right? Like, God, these guys have all the ideas, and we want this light and that light, and this. We want to play these 10 songs, and we're going to play at this tempo instead of that tempo, and all that stuff. But actually, they're a ministry department head. That's how I classify them. And any great ministry department head needs to probably function like a 3, because it's your job to do the thing that was built and look out for ways to improve it along the way. And so that's probably the toughest one to swallow, is feeling like in my interim, if I want to lead a church, if I want to be an executive pastor, I want to be a senior pastor, I want to be like a huge mega church department head or something like that, for you to think I've got to be a 7 or I've got to feel like a 7, but actually have to do the work of a 3. If you fall into that trap, you'll hurt yourself. And so, it's pretty much that. And really, when we did this as a staff, you would see that we're all clumped up in the middle. We're like between a 4.6 and a 7.1. And we looked at it and we said, well, is this healthy? Should we actually have more of a balance? And then you start to think, well, it's not that we want the grinding work to be done by a volunteer, but in reality, we want those people to come alongside and share in the joy and the service of the church. It's a huge deal. And so, as a church staff, we actually would probably say most of that 1 to 3 work is done by volunteers, even if that's not their natural wiring. It's a short-term thing. In the business world, you would think differently. You would think we probably need to have a lot of 1 to 3s. And remember what you saw? 16%, 86%. So if this was a business, we'd want to say, gosh, we need tons of support to support this layer of hierarchy so that when we're at the very top, we've actually got it. But in a church, you would see that your 1 to 3s and your 7 to 10s probably are accomplished with volunteers.
Interesting. How do I, as a person who just figured this out, for myself, begin to lean in and sort of test, if this is working right? I figured out I'm a builder, say. So how do I go back to my dorm room, or when I go to my church, is there ways you can kind of lean into this and decide, if you would slide a little this way or that way? How do you test this out? It's a theory at this point.
Yeah, it's not a theory. Like, you've actually been doing this your whole life. You get in the car with 4 friends and somebody says, let's go to dinner. And the next question is, where are we going to go? And we all know if we're the guy that says, let's go to Applebee's, or we're the guy that says, I don't know, where do you want to go? And, controversially, my wife and I are both that second way, so we never end up going to dinner. But you already do this. You test out these theories. If you're a 7, you start to think in terms of, I know the options and I'm just going to pick one. You're the guy in the car that says, nope, we're going to Applebee's, and everybody else probably follows along unless there's another 7 in the car. Or if you're in a car full of 3s, you will never go out to dinner. If you're in a car full of 1s, you might as well turn around and go home. But that's like you already live out these decisions. So day-to-day relational decisions, whether you're in your dorm room with your suite mates and you're saying, here's a decision we need to make. We need to decide how we're going to keep this room clean. And you have to decide as a living unit of people who's going to do what and what's going to happen. And you look for those people that jump out. I always hesitate to say this, but you look at that 16% on this other side over here, and you say, look, those are probably the leaders. There's a difference between managers and leaders, right? Mm-hmm. And when you look at those, the whole world, 50% of the world can't be a leader. Most people are going to be leaders. Now, I believe that you're here because you are a leader. You're a future church leader. And so this may look really tainted in your dormitory, or when you go to some restaurant or something like that. You might have a bunch of people who just know exactly what you want to do. But I think you can start to test the water a little bit just by looking at your everyday decisions, because I think really it's not just work or volunteerism that applies to this, it's everyday life.
So if I have this right, if you have a bunch of 10s in a car on the way to dinner, you're going to try someplace new every time you go out?
I think that's how that app was created that scrolls through the things and randomly picks it. Yeah.
Oh, there's an app for that?
I think so. I don't think it's on an Android. I think it's only... What's that app called anyways? Does anybody still use it? Urban Spoon, yes.
Urban Spoon.
Urban Spoon was created by a room full of 10s. And they said, what are all the restaurants in the whole entire world? Let's put them all in an app.
It's pretty amazing. All right, good. What am I not asking? What else do we need to cover? Anything else you want to close with?
I spent 40 minutes telling him everything I wanted.
All right, we got a question from the audience. This is risky. We got a couple minutes. Then we got a question. Go ahead, shout it. I'll repeat it so we can hear it. Church planners, where do they fall on the spectrum?
Well, I mean, if you're the lead pastor of the church plant, you should probably fall in that 5 to 7. Here's the difference, though. Unlike a senior pastor at a bigger organization, and I'm talking like 100 people plus, probably. That's a big organization to me. Like a church planner probably has to do the work of many. But you're probably not going to be a 3 if you're a 7. You're probably going to function between that 5 to 7 because you have to be the executive pastor of your organization. And that's just reality. A lot of smaller churches, you look at their staff page and they don't have an executive pastor. They don't even know what that is. Calvary didn't have an executive pastor until 2 years ago. And then we realized we had 2. We just didn't call them that. And so church planners are probably going to need to be that 7 for the long term, unless you plan on planting churches a lot. But church planting is very entrepreneurial in nature, so still be a 7, even though you have to function like a 5.
Good question. Another one? Anybody else? Hey, I missed one. Yeah.
Wow. Do you want to repeat that one?
I can try.
You might have to get your Logos out.
Right. I don't have a password.
Me neither.
The question, I think, is when God calls unqualified people to do things that they might not normally be gifted to do. And so, I think we've heard that saying before, he doesn't equip the call. How does it go? He doesn't equip the call. He doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called.
Yep.
Figured it out. Thank you. Is that kind of what you're asking? How does this? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it really comes down to a capacity issue. I mean, I can do anything for a season. I can do anything that I need to for as long as I feel like I can do it. And if I feel like I can continue to do it, then I'll keep doing it. But that's reality. And so I feel like when God calls you to do something, just like you said, He is going to equip you. And I don't know that. I mean, no one on the planet could probably say He's going to change your natural wiring for a season, but He's going to give you the capacity to do what He's asking you to do. And so that means that if He's asking you to be a 1 and you're a 10, He's going to give you the mental and physical strength to make that happen day in and day out as long as He needs you to do it.
Good question. Thanks for being here. Appreciate that. Let's thank Aaron.